Good evening, everyone. Happy Juneteenth. My name is Araba Hassan, and I will be facilitating this session today. Just welcome you all for those who are new and those who are returning to the second annual National Black Researchers Week hosted by Association of Black Researchers. Our theme this year is really connecting researchers to resources. Tonight, our fabulous speaker, Dr. Joy Washington, she will be talking with us on quantitative and qualitative software basics. Please feel free to drop any questions that you have in the Q&A session. Also, after the Q&A session, we will announce the winner of tonight's giveaway, which is a 30-minute dissertation consultation with Dr. Callie Edwards, who is the CEO of Life of a Scholar LLC. So with that being said, I will pass it over to you, Dr. Joy, to kick off our first day of National Black Researchers Week.
Awesome. I'm so excited. I don't know. I'm not exactly familiar with the webinar side of Zoom. So if y'all could drop in the chat where you're tuning in from so I can make sure that my chat is working properly. Can you drop in the chat where you're tuning in from for me just real quick? Yeah, I have no idea. I don't think. I'm trying to see if I can see. Do you see anything, Erica?
I do not, but I will post just to get people familiar.
Table, so I'll work on that.
Okay.
Thank you. So with that being said, welcome everyone. We will work on the chat, but I am Dr. Joy Washington. Folks around the internet call me Dr. Joy. I am a community health research and education consultant.
Dr. Joy, try it now. They can try it now.
Okay. Oh, I see now. I see. I'm not sure if it's Nakaya or Nikia from Chicago, Illinois. I see it now. Let's see. Oh, everyone. Okay, got it. Yes. And please, if you're using the chat, please make sure to put everyone in that two, where it says two, so that we can all see your responses. They rolling in now. All right, Toronto, we got Boston, we got Philly, we got Chapel Hill, Michigan, Philadelphia. Okay, we got it going now. We good. All right. So keep those coming. As I said, I'm a community health research and education consultant. I have a public health consulting firm as well, where we focus on transforming public health research into positive community impact. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about quantitative and qualitative software basics and kind of what that looks like. So I am going to get my screen shared real quick. Let's get into presentation mode. We'll make sure that you all can see the screen. Okay, y'all see that? Let me see if I can pull up chats. There we go. Yes, okay, awesome. Glad you all can see that. So I might have a little hard time actually seeing the chat kind of while I'm presenting. So you all can drop questions, drop it in the Q&A box or feature down there so that we can make sure that we're capturing all of those questions, okay? So like I said, I am the CEO of Joy Washington Public Health Consulting. And so really what we focus on is transforming public health research into positive community impact. And so our purpose is to transform public health research into those life-changing public health solutions that bring joy to the communities that we serve. And I was listening to a news segment today on Juneteenth, and they said that the person who was being interviewed said that as Black people, our trauma and our joy coexist. And I think that was a perfect description, a very beautiful description of kind of what we experience in our culture and in our heritage And we do have so much trauma, but we also experience joy. And so what does that look like when we start thinking about research and public health from the perspective of joy, serving our communities with joy? And so our mission is to revolutionize public health by supporting, training, equipping, and positioning public health researchers to make a positive impact in communities and start thinking about the perspective of joy in our work. And so we accomplish this by providing training, technical assistance, advisement to community-based organizations and nonprofits, as well as public health organizations who are engaged in research efforts and initiatives. And so our vision is to really improve the future of public health research by creating those sustainable solutions that will lead to healthier communities, prevention of poor health outcomes, and then also health equity. So in today's session, we are going to focus on introducing the importance of research software when it comes to data collection and analysis. I'm going to do a very broad, very high level overview of qualitative and quantitative research software. We'll kind of go into detail about the different characteristics, the pros and cons, different things to be on the lookout for. We'll look at the most popular options for qualitative and quantitative research, and then also think about the key factors in deciding, what type of research software you may need. So just as a quick introduction, just so we know where we all stand, I want to make sure that we all know what's the difference between quantitative and qualitative research. So drop it in the chat. What's the difference between qualitative and quantitative research? I'll wait for y'all's response. So you can just pop it in the chat. Morgan says one is numbers and one is experiences. Tiana says, as a quantitative researcher, I am all about the numbers. Exactly. Lorraine says one uses number data, the other uses descriptive data from like focus groups or interviews. Quant is more numbers, qualitative is more text or descriptives. Quantitative quantifies and qualitative tells the story. Exactly. So this is what we're talking about when we're talking about quantitative research and qualitative research. So when we're talking about quantitative, we're talking about the numbers, everything numerical, right? And then when we're talking about qualitative, it looks a lot different. So in quantitative, we talked about numerical data. We're looking at statistical analysis, right? We're looking at those measurable and objective data points, those things that are quantifiable. What can we assign a number to, right? But when we're talking about qualitative is pretty much anything that's not numbers. So it can be descriptive or narrative. You might have words, phrases, or images. And when you're looking at qualitative data, you're going to be looking at those themes that come up, and it can be a lot more subjective, right? Because we're looking at things that are not numerical. We're looking at people's lived experiences. We may be looking at storytelling. So that's going to be very different. But one of the things that I love about quantitative and qualitative is they work better together. And that's kind of where we get into mixed methods, right? So mixed methods is combining the quantitative side and the qualitative side. And so they integrate with one another, because a lot of times when we're doing quantitative, we have the numbers, but we don't know the story behind the numbers. We don't know why those numbers are the way they are. And so that's why qualitative can come into play and give us the story behind the numbers. Because when we're talking about research and we're talking about data, it's all about interpretation. Our data points, our research is nothing without the interpretation. What does this all mean and how can it be applied? And so when we're thinking about quantitative and qualitative, we do have those folks who are like, quantitative, I'm all about the numbers, that's my thing, don't give me no qualitative. And then we have the people who are, I'm qualitative, I don't want the numbers, statistics is a beast I don't even want to deal with. But when we are able to work with them together, it really creates a more robust and fuller picture of what the data is trying to tell us. So we're going to talk about softwares that's going to help us with all three sides: quantitative, qualitative, as well as mixed methods. Everybody cool? Drop a 1 in the chat for me if you're cool. Everybody cool? Awesome, great. So let's do a overview of research software. But before we get into that, I want to talk a little bit about the role of software in quantitative and qualitative research. So software can do a lot of different things. And so the software includes those specialized tools that are going to assist us in collecting the research, organizing the data, and analyzing the data. And a lot of these software solutions are designed to handle, data in several different formats, right? And when it comes to both quantitative and qualitative research, it helps us not only with collecting the data, analyzing the data, managing the data, but also how do we streamline our processes? Because if you've done research, there's a lot of moving pieces, right? There's a lot going on when it comes to doing research. So we want to make sure that our processes and our procedures are very clear and very organized. So there are some softwares that can help us, or some features in softwares that can help us better understand how to streamline those processes. And then we also want to look at how that software helps us to prepare data for that interpretation that I talked about earlier, but also how are we preparing data for dissemination? Because the data doesn't mean a whole lot if it just stays with us. We have to be prepared to put that data out into the world and in different formats, out to our communities. It may be out in the form of a manuscript. It may be out in the form of several different ways. So we want to make sure that we have the software in place to not just collect, analyze, and manage, but also what are we going to do with it? How are we going to interpret it and disseminate that data? So when we're thinking about collecting data, let's talk a little bit about survey software, right? So survey software in terms of data collection and management. So there are several, okay, but these are the top 4 that we're going to talk a little bit about. So when it comes to our survey software, that of course enables researchers to design, distribute, and analyze surveys and questionnaires for quantitative data collection. So you will be able to design your questionnaire within these platforms and then distribute the questionnaire to potential participants who may take the survey, right? So when you're talking about survey software, you're looking at the question types, the survey logic, how you're designing your survey as well. And you also want to look at features like response tracking. How can you export your data? Those are some things you want to look at. So here are the top 4 that we're going to talk about, which is Qualtrics, RedCap, SurveyMonkey, and Google Forms. Okay, so when it comes to Qualtrics and RedCap, these are going to be the 2 that's going to be most associated with probably your university or your institution, or if you're part of an organization. Qualtrics and RedCap are usually not for individual or personal use. So with Qualtrics, it is very versatile. Qualtrics is what we use at my university. It is very versatile. It's powerful survey software. And it has everything built into it where you can design the survey, you can distribute the survey using QR codes or anonymous links. It looks very good on the user side, whoever is taking the software. It can be tailored to that institution or that university's brand as well. You can export that data very efficiently as well. And the thing about Qualtrics is that Qualtrics is made for a broader audience. So when it comes to Qualtrics, of course, you have those advanced features and the customization options. It has robust data security because we want to make sure that our data is secure. right? And it can also integrate very well with any statistical analysis software, and very similar to REDCap. REDCap is also very robust, a little bit more complex, but the main difference between Qualtrics and REDCap is that REDCap is specifically designed for academic and research institutions. Qualtrics can be used in branding, marketing, customer feedback, business, finance, economics, education. Qualtrics can be used for anything as far as a survey, but REDCap is specifically for academic institutions and research institutions. So you really want to make sure you understand the difference between those, and make sure you check with your university, your institution or organization to see what is the survey software that they use for data collection. You can check usually with your library or your IT department, your tech department. They would know what kind of surveys are normally used by the university, institution, or organization. So those are usually going to be your top two when it comes to that type of thing. Now, if you're talking about something you're doing on the side, something for individual use or personal use, your top two are usually going to be SurveyMonkey or Google Forms. Now, SurveyMonkey is very popular. And it's typically very easy to use, and people are familiar with it. It does come at a price, depends on what your pocketbook looks like. And they also have organization, of course, pricing as well. But when it comes to Google Forms is free. It does the basics when it comes to running a survey or building your questionnaire. You have some basic abilities in there to do skip logic or survey logic, things of that nature. You can export your data to Excel or a Google Sheet. And so if you need to do something very basic, so if you're doing something for, let's say, class, and maybe you don't have access to a Qualtrics or a REDCap for whatever reason, you can typically use Google Forms to do something basic and do what you need to do. So these will be the top four, but always, always, always check with your university, because a lot of times you will have access to those more advanced survey softwares for free, for sure. So definitely check those out. Now, as we are getting into the quantitative software, right? After we've collected our data, we've done the survey and all of that, what are some of the tools that we can use to analyze that data? Now, some of these you're probably a little bit more familiar with, right? SPSS, Data, R&R Studio, SAS, all of that, right? So when it comes to statistical analysis, right? Because quantitative is our numbers. So when we're talking about the quantitative software, these are the softwares, the most popular softwares, I would say, that you're going to use for a statistical analysis, okay? Now, SPSS is the one that I am most familiar with. SPSS stands for Statistical Package for the Social Sciences. It is quite comprehensive. You can do a lot of different things with it, data manipulation, data visualization, things like that, your t-test, ANOVA, regression, factor analysis, statistical modeling, all those types of things you can do with all of these programs. However, the biggest thing with SPSS is that all you have to know how to do is click buttons. You can click a button and it'll spit out the output, right? As long as you know what you're doing, you can just click buttons. There's no coding required as far as knowing it. You can use coding or syntax, what we call syntax, to basically type instructions for the statistical programming or analysis to occur. But SPSS does not require it. They have several menu options, just like we click around on our computers all the time. So SPSS, you can click buttons and run whatever statistical analysis you need to. The trick is you got to know what buttons to click. So that is one of the things about SPSS. Now, the other option that you have. If you are not as familiar with SPSS, and SPSS is another one of those programs that is probably going to be hosted by your university, your organization, your institution. So if you want to get a flavor of SPSS, but maybe you don't have access to SPSS, or maybe your university uses a different program, you can use something called JASP. Drop a 1 if you've ever heard of JASP. Drop a 2 if you like, I don't know what that is. Whole bunch of 2s, whole bunch of, I saw 1 thrown in there somewhere. Oh, I see a few 1s, I see a few 1s. Okay, so JASP stands for Jeffrey's Amazing Statistical Programs, or Statistics Program. Yeah, Jeffrey's Amazing Statistics Program. And so what it is it's an open source, and open source is just a free version of SPSS. Okay, so it has very similar functionality to SPSS, but it is open source. So if you want to play with it a little bit, you can just Google JASP, capital J, JASP. And it will come up, and you just download the software to your computer, and they have instructions and things like that. And you can go through it, and it works just like SPSS. You can run your data analysis, you can put things in there, not as complex as SPSS, but does a lot of the same basic functionalities. So that's an extra resource to have in your back pocket, especially when maybe you did have access to SPSS, when you were at your institution, but then you graduate, then they cut you off, and then you don't have access to it anymore. When those types of things happen, yeah, it's nice to have something in your back pocket that you can always go to. So JASP is one of those things. Also, when it comes to the more advanced, I would consider Stata, R&R Studio, and SAS to be a little bit more advanced for sure. And I will drop the link for JASP in the chat there. That's the link for JASP. But when it comes to Stata, R&R Studio, and SAS, typically you need to know a little bit of coding and programming, and how to write syntax and those types of things. But these 3 programs are also very robust, very flexible if you know coding. R&R Studio are also open source, so they are free. And they usually have a great community of people who really know R&R Studio. So those come with a greater learning curve. But of course, if you're interested, it's a great skill to have and to learn, especially with the progression of the fields. That is an excellent skill to know how to code and do programming for statistical analysis. Of course, Stata and SAS and SPSS might be a little pricier. So like I said, you might want to check with your institution to see if you have the access to those resources. The other thing is there are lots of courses. If you are not familiar with Stata or R&R Studio, SAS, SPSS, not only check your university, but also check Coursera and Udemy. I don't know if it's Udemy or Udemy, however you say it, one of those. They have lots of courses on these statistical programs. And a lot of times your university might be signed up in a partnership with Coursera or Udemy for like, I think you get like 1 free course or something like that. I know our university has that option. So definitely check those out for sure. Let me check the chat, make sure there's nothing else in here. Yes, okay. Now, when it comes to qualitative software, remember, that's going to be more of our words, text, images, stories, lived experiences, all those types of things, right? So qualitative research involves exploring and understanding the phenomena, right, from this kind of subjective and contextual perspective. So you're going to be looking at in-depth examinations, interpretations, beliefs, behaviors. And while qualitative research can be a lot more rich, we need a different type of software. So these are some of the top softwares that I would look into and recommend. Of course, once again, check with your university to see if these are available. NVivo is very powerful as far as organizing, coding, and helping you to analyze the qualitative data. But this is the thing that you need to know when it comes to qualitative data. It does not matter what kind of software you decide to use. No software is going to analyze the data for you. What qualitative software does is provide you with features to help you organize the data better so that you can analyze it, because it's so subjective. I might look at it one way and think and code or organize things differently than you might look at it or code it or organize it. So you have to really think about that and know that when you're talking about qualitative research software. So when it comes to NVivo, it can be a lot more pricey. So usually a university will have a license or something like that. They might have some student licenses and things of that nature. But it really just depends on what you need. They have features like tree coding, matrix coding, search, text search, visualization tools. They do have some advanced analysis features that you may or may not need depending on what stage you're in, but it is a steeper learning curve. And like I said, it comes at a little bit of a higher cost. Now, Atlas TI is another one that is often used, tends to be very user-friendly as well, and very much like NVivo also offers, the coding, how to code in different families and arrive at those themes, having different types of visualization as well. And you can work in teams too. So you have some access for collaboration there, and we'll talk about that in a couple minutes. But the other thing to think about is, do you need a mixed methods approach to your data analysis and your software? Because if you need mixed methods, then you need to look into a software that's similar or like MaxQDA. So MaxQDA is a lot more complex. I don't hear people use it often. Definitely one of those research institution or organization type softwares, but it's going to be really helpful in your data organization, coding, and analysis in qualitative and quantitative research. So it's definitely a lot more advanced and has a lot more robust reporting options and visualizations and data linking and those types of things. Tends to be user-friendly, but definitely for the mixed methods work, for sure. So definitely think about that when you're doing research and thinking about what type of software you need. Now, this last one, you're probably like, why is Microsoft Word and Excel on here? So this, I would say, would be my favorite way to analyze qualitative data, because remember what I said, when it comes to qualitative software, the software is not going to analyze the data for you. It just helps you organize the data a little bit better. So if you have some qualitative data that's not too complex, let's say you have 3 or 4 interviews or something like that, you can just use Microsoft Word or Excel to organize different keywords and phrases, or to color code them, highlighting different parts of the interview or the focus group and putting it together. When I was first introduced to qualitative research, we didn't have no software, none at all. They taught us how to do qualitative research by printing out the focus group or the interviews on different pieces of colored paper. So like interview 1 would be printed out on orange paper. Interview 2 would be on blue paper. Interview 3 would be on green paper. And then we would cut out with scissors, cut out the different phrases and put them on poster boards and organize. That's how we would organize our themes and code our data for qualitative. That's how I learned to do it. Now we've got software that can do that for us, but the principle is still the same. We just have an electronic way to do it. So you can use, if you're ever in a bind or don't have access to these types of things, these types of softwares, and your data is not too complex, you can just use Microsoft Word and Excel to organize your data and get to those emerging things. So that is definitely something that you can use for sure. All right. Now, the other thing that we need to talk about is research software at every stage of the process. So you're going to need research software more than just collecting your data in surveys or analyzing your data. You're going to need it for every step. So for instance, if you're doing anything with mapping or geographic location, you might need some GIS software. If you are taking the statistical analysis a little bit further and you're looking at a visual representation of the relationships between your variables, you need to consider the software that's going to have statistical modeling as a feature. If you are working in teams and collaboration, a lot of our research happens in teams and collaboration. You might need to look at some project management software. How are you keeping track of your different tasks and who is doing it, who is responsible for it? You also need to look at citation management. So your Mendeley, your Zotero, your EndNote, those types of softwares are going to be very helpful as you are reviewing the data. I mean, not the data, the literature, looking at the literature and seeing what is out there. So you want to have a systematic way of keeping up with all of your citations, and maybe you got an annotated bibliography or something like that, because you can get lost in the literature, right? And speaking of literature, so I'm already on it, also your literature search. The library is your best friend. Find your librarian. They will walk you through it. A lot of universities have specialized librarians for your specific field. And if you go find that librarian, they will make your world so much easier. And they can show you exactly how to do your literature search in the most efficient way. So definitely have the software for that. I know a lot of universities use like EBSCOhost or Academic Search Premier. You might have something different at your university to assist with literature search. So make sure you know those. When it comes to your qualitative, you might be doing transcriptions, right? I'm not doing transcriptions by hand anymore. We have software for that. So you might need transcription software like Otter AI or Descript are a couple. Also, when it comes to data visualization, Tableau is a very popular one. So you want to think about what type of softwares you have available at every stage of the process, okay? So let's get into these 4 tips. So these are my top 4 tips for selecting your research software. Doesn't matter if you're doing quantitative, qualitative, or mixed methods, right? Number 1, you want to be clear on your objectives, right? So you want to clearly define what are your research objectives? What is it that you need to do? And what are the features in these different softwares that is going to help you meet your objectives, achieve your objectives? So if you can actually align your software capabilities to your research goals, then that's going to make everything more efficient. That is going to streamline your processes in what you need to do. The next thing you want to consider is your budget, how much money you got. You know, the world runs on money, right? So there are some things that out there that are available for free. Always go with free first, I recommend. And of course, if you have access to those things at your university, use them up, okay? A lot of times when it comes to budgetary constraints and the cost of things, that can put up a barrier, right, to our research. So make sure you know how to budget for your software without compromising the quality of your research. Nothing wrong with using Google Forms or Microsoft Word and Excel, as long as you know how to use it and you know how to use it correctly, and you can still have high quality research, analysis, and interpretation using those tools, as long as you know how to do it. So definitely make sure that you take into consideration your budget. The other thing that you want to make sure that you are aware of is your familiarity, okay? How proficient are you in these softwares, and how much of a learning curve is it going to be? You really want to think about how long will it take you to learn the software, and how will that maximize your productivity? So think about that, and also, don't be afraid to explore new things and try new things, because that can definitely work into your advantage. But if you need something done quickly, or you're in a crunch time, you might not have time to learn R. You might not have time to learn how to use NVivo. So you might want to consider SPSS, because all you have to do is click buttons. It might be a little bit easier to work with that depending on what your time looks like, but always be willing to learn new skills. So definitely take that into consideration. And then lastly, you want to think about the features of your software that's going to help you collaborate, and how your softwares are going to integrate with one another. So when it comes to your software, if you use SPSS and you're doing mixed methods, you want to think about what softwares integrate with one another. How do they work together? If you are doing transcription software, do you have a qualitative data analysis software that will integrate with your transcription software, so it takes one less step out of the process? You want to think about, if you have teams or collaboration, what does that look like as far as who has control over things such as editing and communication about different things? So you really want to take in consideration, when you start reading those features lists on your different softwares, think about what does it look like and how easy is it to collaborate with other people and then integrate with other systems. All right. So I've got a few more resources for you. That's going to wrap up the overview of the softwares. Let me check the chat real quick, see what we got in there. All right, let's see. And I saw someone said Power, what did it say? How about Power BI? I am not familiar with Power BI. I'm not sure about that one. I'm not sure if that's a software. I'm not familiar with that one. So if you can drop it in the chat, let me know what it is. It might jog my memory. While we are doing that, a few more resources just so you are aware. I do host a podcast, so the Public Health Joy podcast, which you can find on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, where we talk about all things public health research. And so it truly is a safe space for that real and honest conversation about all the things that we experience as public health, specifically public health researchers. So I do have an episode 11 is called Life as a Black Researcher. So I go into detail about my story and what my life has been like as a Black researcher. So you can definitely check that out. I also, the other resources that I'm going to tell you about, I have a QR code in the corner. So you can scan that, or you can go to joywashington.com/links, and you'll have all the links to all these resources that I'm about to share. Also, when it comes to research, we talked a little bit about dissemination. It can be hard to start writing a manuscript, right? It can be hard to get motivated to start writing. So we are hosting a free session. It's called Manuscript Manifesto. And what a manuscript manifesto is it's a, think about it like an affirmation or a powerful declaration of your purpose, your unique perspective, to help guide your manuscript writing journey, and will kind of serve as your North Star, if you will, to help motivate you and be your why, essentially, to keep you motivated as you start writing your manuscript. So you can check that out. We are open for registration, so that will be held Thursday, June 29th, from 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. Eastern. So I think we got some folks in the room tonight who attended our last one. So y'all can drop some nuggets down there on how Manuscript Manifesto was. But yeah, so we'll be hosting that. And then the last thing is that Burnout is one of the sessions that we're going to be talking about later this week for National Black Researchers Week. And so we are also hosting a book club in partnership with Public Health Podcasters. So we're calling it the Rest Liberation for Public Health. And we will be reading the book Rest is Resistance, because we know that for a very long time, we have been working ourselves to exhaustion and burnout, and working ourselves like machines, and machines we are not. So we have to start learning, how do we liberate ourselves through rest, and what does this look like? So we are going to read Tricia Hersey's book, Rest is Resistance. Tricia Hersey is Bishop of the NAP Ministry, if you are familiar. And so you can join the July book club. It is 40% off right now until June 23rd. So we want to make sure that we are learning how to rest and prevent ourselves from burnout. We are going to get into the Q&A, but here's my contact information if you want to screen grab that real quick. But got my website. You can always reach out to me by email. I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter. If you reach out to me on LinkedIn, please make sure to send me a personal note so that I accept your request. And I will be glad to continue engaging further and talking more about this conversation. So I am going to stop my screen share real quick and we can get into Q&A.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Joy, for this amazing presentation. So we do have some questions in the Q&A chat. So the first one from one of our members mentioned that their current institution does not have Qualtrics or REDCap. However, they do have access to Microsoft Forms. What is your opinion of using Microsoft Forms?
Yeah, so Microsoft Forms works very similar to Google Forms. I'm just not a Microsoft kind of girl. I don't like it. I did use it. I have tried it. My institution also has Microsoft Forms. And so it can be used. It can be used. As long as you know how to use it, it's fine. You can definitely export your data. It will do what it needs to do. I just personally don't like it. I don't like it. Feels kind of clunky to me. But other than that, I mean, Microsoft Forms is completely fine for doing your survey and collecting and doing what you need to do.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Another question we have from the audience is, how do these survey software help with recruiting participants? I know SurveyMonkey has a pricing package for recruiting specific sample sizes.
Yeah, so when it comes to recruitment for participants, you do want to look at that as a feature in your survey. I know with Qualtrics, they offer different ways to distribute surveys. And so that can be super helpful in how you recruit participants because you're doing it in multiple different ways. So that can be helpful with recruitment. So you definitely want to consider that. I was looking for the wait, did the question go away? Hold on.
No, I got it here. Yep.
I was looking in the question box and I was trying to read it. Okay. But yes, so you do want to, if you need something of a larger sample size, you may want to look at those particular survey softwares that offer something for larger sample sizes. So that's definitely something to consider. But if you have something relatively small, something that's not too complex, you can use something like Google Forms or Microsoft Forms or any of that. So that is definitely something to consider for sure.
Nice.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, another question from the audience. They're concerned about using the free software that you mentioned, the JASP. What should we look for in choosing a free software to protect people's privacy?
Yeah, so data security is super important, right? We want to make sure that people's stuff is kept confidential. Now, one of the things that I will say about those types of things when it comes to free software and the softwares that I mentioned specifically as far as JAS and then like R&R Studio. A lot of times when you're collecting that data, it's helpful to make sure that that data is de-identified before you upload it into, you know, different types of software programs. As long as that data is de-identified and doesn't have any type of, you know, associations with a particular person or individual, you should be fine because they are just numbers. But anytime you are dealing with people's any type of identifiable information, personal information, then that's where you might want to consider the data security options of like Qualtrics or RedCap, those types of things. But yes, definitely be aware of security and privacy. But as long as all that information has been de-identified, and especially the other thing that I'll say in there is if you are doing research that requires an IRB, going through IRB approval, they will make sure to address those concerns with you as well. And I will also say that if you're working with data sets, for instance, like the CDC has secondary data that's widely available, it's public, it's all de-identified. So that's going to be the biggest thing in using that free software, is making sure that everything is de-identified.
Great, thank you. And another question we have, what are the best types of software to determine power of a study? Also, do you know of any software that helps with randomization of data?
Yeah, so you would definitely want to check your software features to see what's available there. I do know of one that helps with power, which is G-Power, is one that we have used, that I have used frequently to determine sample size, has been G-Power. Some of your software features will help with randomization of data. It just depends on what you want to do with that as far as the randomization of data, because that could mean a lot of different things. So I would definitely say check your software features and then look into G-Power for determining the power of a study. I believe G-Power is open source as well. I believe it's free. And then there may be some features in that software that assist with determining the power of your study as well. And I also will say that when it comes, and I meant to say this at the beginning, but I forgot, when it comes to your data analysis software, whether you are doing qualitative or quantitative, but especially quantitative, the key thing about that software is to know conceptually how data works. If you do not know conceptually how data works, how statistics works, if you don't know the calculations behind a t-test or the calculations behind a ANOVA, like what it means and how it works, it's going to be much harder, okay, to deal with things that maybe, how do I want to word this? It's just gonna be harder because you're not gonna know what's happening behind the scenes. It's kind of like how they made us do long division in school when we could have just used a calculator to divide. But because we did the long division, we know what's happening. You gotta know the concept behind what you're doing as far as statistics is concerned or any type of data is concerned.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Joy. Another question that we have is, I have access to software and training materials. How could I best utilize these resources for self-training? So for example, sample data sets and calculations.
Yeah, for sure. So if you have access to software and training materials, definitely take it step by step, take your time. If you have a kind of like set timeline or goal, that can be helpful. I like to create myself a syllabus just to kind of help, just to kind of help me stay on track with doing a little bit of something every day. So it's no different than, you know, anything else. If you ran track, if you played piano, if you played tennis, or you were on swim team or whatever, you practiced, right? You just practice just like you would practice anything else, and set yourself a schedule. I would also say you can cross-reference. So like if you have textbooks, if you have a statistics textbook, a lot of them will have free resources that like come with the book, supplemental materials that come with the book. So I know a lot of times we used to just toss those codes to the side, but definitely with the companion guide or whatever, but definitely tap into those, because a lot of those textbooks come with those sample data sets and extra training resources. So go back to your old textbooks and, kind of see what's in there. Those are helpful. And like I said, Coursera, Udemy, all of those. Like I said, there are publicly available data sets as well. On the CDC website, I know for sure, I actually did my dissertation based on a CDC secondary data set. So those are some great places to start and just practice like you would do anything else. And that's the biggest thing. You have to make the time to practice. And I saw somebody else say Microsoft Forms and Google Forms are not technically HIPAA compliant. That is something to be aware of. So if you are doing something that falls along the lines that needs to be HIPAA compliant, definitely do not use Microsoft Forms or Google Forms for different things like that. And check with your university. And then of course you'll also need to check with your IRB, because they might have some resources available as well to make sure that they are HIPAA compliant.
Great. I think that's all of our questions in the Q&A session. I will ask just one question from one of our questions that was submitted during the registration. And I think this actually might close us out. Best advice for changing disciplines and learning new research methods you've never used before?
Oh yeah, just do it. That's the advice, just do it. Just, it can be scary, right, to change directions and to not know where you're going or how to learn different types of software, but you just have to do it. Don't be afraid of it. You have to think about, what are your goals, right? What's going to be best for you? And you can kind of move forward from there, right? So if you are thinking about changing directions, do what's in your best interest and the skill set that you want to learn. A lot of times we're like, oh, what's in the organization's best interest? And that's cool. But if it's not in your best interest, I mean, what difference is it really going to make? Right? We got to start learning how to put ourselves first and what's going to be important for us. And if you're not a quantitative person and quantitative is not aligned with your goals, it's okay not to deal with it as much. You need to know some, but it's okay not to be an expert in it, right? You can be an expert in your own way, in your own thing, and learn at your own pace. Like that's completely okay. So just ride the wave and just do it. Just do it the best way you know how, because it's all different for all of us. It's a season for all of us. So I know that might not have been the response, the most direct response, but I have changed directions a number of times and I've learned to just do it. Just do it. And I did see somebody say, your podcast is awesome. Thank you, Morgan. I appreciate that. I'm just trying to make sure I didn't miss anything else. I think I saw it all.
Yeah, I think people are really responding to your advice that you mentioned. So I just want to thank you so much, Dr. Joy, for your wonderful presentation. So much gems were dropped, necessary gems. I learned things that I was not aware of. So this is news for me. So I just want to thank you so much. And I will pass it over to Leonora, who will close us out.
I am so excited. This was great. Thank you, Dr. Joy. Thank you, Araba, for kicking off day one of National Black Researchers